to kind of just like hang back and let them do something. And then if I don't really know what I don't want to like, I don't want to like jump in and be like, this is what I think, if I'm just supposed to kind of like.
Oh, no, you can
jump in.
Well.
Okay.
Of course you can. I mean, like, this is ultimately a discussion. Anyway, hi everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Rose Pill, not seal of approval, even though there is a seal on the screen. Just to kind of clarify, I think a few people are confused. Seal of approval is the weekly series that I do with Scrump, and that's more on current events. That's not related to LGBTQIA++ issues, whereas the Rose Pill is generally more about trans stuff and the gay agenda and all of that lovely intersectional bullshit. Anyway, this week is actually going to be quite an interesting discussion. So, as you might have seen, the topic of the stream is whether or not the gender critical community, so to speak, is transphobic or not. And joining me this evening, we have Lyon. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. And it's a pleasure. This is my debut for a live stream, so I'm very happy to be here.
In fact, this is everyone's debut on any of my streams. Although I think Fionne in particular might have been on quite a few. Anyway, we also have Mel. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and finally, the much requested Fionne Orlander, who people have been asking for me to get her on my channel for the longest time, and now it's happened. Hi, Fionne.
Thanks for having me.
So, just before we go into the discussion, as a little bit of a background. So all of this came about because of a particular. Let me just bring up the message in question, if I can even find it. Oh, this is a really annoying thing. All right, so it's that one there. Okay, cool. This is the annoying thing when it all brings up random words. So this is the message which basically started the stream. So I'm sure quite a few of the people watching this might have heard that Reddit did a huge wave of banning earlier in the week. Lots of fairly interesting subreddits were banned, including the Donald, right-wing LGBT, one on the Holodomor, one on WooMao. So, there's definitely a political angle being pushed. But one of the most popular Reddits that was banned was R Gender Critical. Now, R Gender Critical has quite a, let's just say, it's quite infamous for a lot of trans people. And a few weeks ago, Lyon took a screenshot of one of the messages that was on there, which she had problem with. So let me just read it out. Happy Father's Day to all Tims and their children. We all know what a woman is. It's not you, your cut off dick and the hormones you shouldn't be taking. So happy Father's Day. If you father children, you're not a woman. You're certainly not a mother. Stop asking your kids to pretend you're their mom. So yeah, that's a bit spicy.
It was definitely spicy.
It's a bit spicy. So this started quite an interesting discussion between Lyon and Fionne as to whether or not, or what the extent is of transphobia from within the gender critical community. So just to start us off, Lyon, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts, and then we will go on to Fionne and see what she has to say.
Sure. Well, when I made the tweet, it was just kind of like, it was just one of the things that I saw on Gender Critical that I just see there all the time, because I've been watching that Reddit occasionally for I don't know, years at this point. And it's just very common there. And I think a lot of gender critical people just kind of deny it, or they either think that it's just well, it's kind of deserving that we say this because the Tims are trying to oppress women and take away our rights, et cetera, et cetera. So they just kind of like to pretend that there's not a very obvious venomous layer to messages like this. And when I brought it up to Fionne, I I kind of felt like she did the same thing that most of them do, which is just like, well, let's not tone police people who are frustrated with the Tims. So I guess that's how that whole thing started.
So Fionne, what are your thoughts on this? Like, do you agree with what Lyon said, or what's your perspective?
No, I can see why it would strike Lyon that way. Can I just say that I'm so annoyed that your name isn't pronounced Lyon? I thought it was.
Am I pronouncing it right or wrong?
No, you're pronouncing it right. That actually surprised me.
For that. Lovely. I'm terrible with the pronunciation of anything. Every single one of my videos,
all my teachers got it wrong, and you got it right. So.
Like whenever in the video I did of J.K. Rowling a few weeks ago, when I was editing it, I noticed I kept on calling her Rowling, which really really annoyed me. Anyway, sorry for taking this up topic. Fionne.
Well, my situation is that I try and look at this from like a lot of different angles, and I have come across stories, particularly if you follow accounts like Trans Widows, where they particularly talk about the situation that transition has on families, and that include children. And so I can kind of understand the frustration. And this is just someone venting on Reddit to me. So, I mean, I don't frequent Reddit because it looks like a huge anonymous thing. That, like, the only time I've ever really been on Reddit is to look at game stuff. So to me, this didn't, like, strike outrage in me. And I feel like that pissed Lyon off even more. But you tied me into the conversation to get my thoughts. And so I tried to, like, explain my point of view.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like I pissed you off even more with that. Because I suppose to you, it looked like I was doing this excusing.
So tell us a little bit more about your point of view then. So just so everyone watching this is on board, like you are a trans woman. You don't necessarily consider yourself gender critical, though. I think you're a bit more like, how do you describe yourself?
To be honest, I find it really hard because I don't know what labels stick. They all keep kind of shifting around.
Right.
But I suppose critical of gender isn't a bad one because I think in a way that we should be aware of the effect gender has on society. Right. And by that I kind of mean norms of sex that are kind of like cemented through culture. So it depends what we mean by gender.
Right.
Well, that definition is a very common gender critical one. So you're kind of boxing yourself in with that already. But I don't think that necessarily made me pissed off. It's just that I'm kind of used to that from you, to be honest. It wasn't necessarily very surprising, but it's kind of like you try and frame it into this like very gentle like context, like, oh, well, maybe these are just these trans widows and they're like their husband suddenly transitioned at 45 and started calling themselves Jessica and all this whatever. Like, that's not really what it's about, because we could make the same analogy with like refugees, because like, I don't know how you guys have it in the UK, but in continental Europe, there are a lot of refugees and some of them can be pretty messy. There can be problems that occur, but if you say like, oh, well, you know, these refugees, and then you name the problem very specifically, that would be reasonable. But if you have like these crazies that are like going off and being like, oh my God, the sand monkeys need to be sent back to like Turban Land, then there's clearly like an element there that's maybe not just critique. It's very obvious that there's like an element of racism there. And I think with race, that's more like obvious. But I think with trans people, they kind of like try to like scoot it under the like cushion, like, oh no, that's not transphobic, that's just our experience.
So Fionne, what do you think of that?
No, I mean, we talked about that in the thread as well, because like, I do think there is a good conversation to be had about the correlation between immigration and transition. I think I said, what did I say in the thread? I said something like, we are kind of like migrants from our own sex class. And I can think of a bunch of different words, positive and negative, that you could apply to a trans person, that you could apply to an immigrant or a refugee. So I always forget this one word. It begins with C. It means like take over.
Colonize.
Colonize. So there's like immigration versus colonization.
Right.
And I see words like that come up in this debate a lot. So I do think it's an interesting comparison to make.
So would you say that you see like a trans woman transitioning and say using a women's bathroom, would that be an example of colonization of gender?
I think you could argue it is, yes.
Right. Okay. So give us a little bit more kind of understanding so we know where you're coming from. So why would that be a colonization?
Well, I think it's because first of all, this is a male person doing that, and then if a male person is trying to make that normal, and this is kind of why they say there is a war on women, because it's kind of a war of like dismantling what a woman is in the first place to include men.
Right. So what do you think? Sorry, Leon, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that's a very radical feminist way of framing things, of like, oh, it's men colonizing women's like spaces and like symbols and language. But I think that in itself is the problem, because when we're talking about like refugees, we're talking about people from a different country. So there are very strict barriers that have been set up. But gender is not really the same thing, because we always coexist in the same spaces. And if we're talking about someone who's like a transsexual, we're talking about someone who has been placed in a situation where their sex isn't the only factor in their social like cohesion. So it doesn't really make sense to say that they're colonizing that space when they've been forced into that situation. It's not like they make a choice of like, well, I just woke up one day and I just decided that I wanted to go to the women's restroom. No, it's like when you transition, there's a material need to go to the women's restroom, because if you reasonably pass and you go into the male restroom, it's going to cause a scene almost every time. And it's very obvious as to why that would be.
Yeah, I can attest to that definitely being a thing. Mel, so you're gender critical.
I am.
You are. And so you've heard like what's kind of being discussed so far. I think it's fair for you to, let us know what your thoughts are, because a lot of this discussion we're having is about the gender critical quote unquote community, which you may well fall into. So what are your thoughts so far?
Well, I don't know so much about like the colonizing thing. I think that women have very valid gripe when it comes to now being forced to share spaces with people that are male-bodied. I don't think that gives anyone a right to belittle people. I don't think that from either side. I think that it's very important for both of us in our communities to call out bad behavior. So I don't think that because gender critical women are very frustrated with trans activists, that gives them a right to be horrible or say very transphobic things that are intended to hurt people. Just like I don't think it makes it valid, for the people who are frustrated on the trans activist side to be, making death threats and rape threats and things like that, because all that does is it instills that fear even further. All of these women are saying, I'm afraid of male-bodied people in my spaces, and then you have people who are claiming to be speaking for trans people or are trans activists, and they're threatening violence and they're threatening rape, and I think that only makes people more afraid. And just like I think that we're accused of being transphobic, and then when you get that one or two people who wants to actually legitimately be a dick and be horribly transphobic, it also instills that kind of feeling in the trans activist side. So I just think that we're both really we need to chill the fuck out. Sorry, I hope you cuss on your channel. I'm sorry.
No. Look, this is going to be demonetized no matter what you say. I mean, so long as you don't drop the N word, we'll probably be fine.
I'm sorry. I probably asked that before I started.
No, it's fine. Like YouTube regularly punishes my channel. Nothing gets monetized anymore.
That's transphobia.
It is. Like I think last year there was like a class action lawsuit being planned by a lot of like queer YouTubers naturally, like, I wasn't asked to be a part of that, or anyone like Blair or Ariel. But yeah, they were saying that YouTube was purposely targeting them because they're queer, and me being trans and on the right, basically, I have no chance of making money. Anyway, sorry for taking that off topic. So Fionne, you heard what Mel said about both sides might need to kind of take a chill pill and kind of mellow out a bit. So how do you see that?
I just want to address a few things that were said just then.
Absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
So I really want to call you Lion. Lyon said that gender and race are very separate issues, and I would totally agree with that, because that's something that comes into this debate a lot. It's like, as soon as you start mentioning women's boundaries, it instantly gets compared to racism. And so I have a problem with that, because even there's a lot of Black women in this debate, or BAME women, saying that the comparison isn't fair, and I even talk to Black men who think this comparison isn't fair. So I would.
Do you know why that comparison is made?
Yeah, I think it is because there's still similar elements to, like tarring a group with one brush.
Yes,
I do see why it comes up, and why it's also difficult to unpick the differences. But I think both sides would agree there is big differences, as Lyon just said. So then we get to the point Mel was making, which was that both sides need to rail it in a lot, and I think it's like, I think we're kind of in this situation because women have been very polite in the past, and this is my kind of beef with the kind of like, there's a true trans out there, and I think this is kind of why we're in this mess, is because that situation was always unsustainable and always heading in this direction, where it would just kind of get piled on. As soon as you open the door, everyone jumps in, and there's no real way to police it. So my kind of efforts are to kind of create trans specified spaces, or not even just trans, just private spaces.
Yeah.
And like Lyon was saying, it's like, if you pass reasonably well, then maybe you'd have an issue if you went into the space of your sex, and then as well, if you didn't pass very well, you'd have an issue if you went into the opposite sex. And there's no real push to make this kind of halfway house between two continents, if we want to go with the immigration metaphor again.
If you don't mind, I just want to just quickly jump in there on something which you said, which is you mentioned about the door is opened on basically the way in which people can identify as being trans, and you're skeptical of the idea that there is no such thing as a true trans person. Do I have that right?
No, I think the belief that there is a true trans person is what leads to this situation.
I mean,
so it doesn't really matter if there is or there isn't, to me. It just matters that the effect that it has is what we're seeing now. We've set up this compassionate access point for people struggling with dysphoria to such extreme levels, and this is where it's led. And so there's people saying, well, we should be more strict and more gate kept, and so to kind of minimize situations that are going to be scary for women and children and things like that. And then there's probably people drawing more hard lines in the sand. And so I think what frightens me is we're not seeing a big push to kind of from the trans community to kind of look out for people who don't pass well and look out for people who just started transitioning. And there's kind of like a group of people who are like, well, I got mine and I did all this and that, and I'm just biologically lucky that it's just kind of, I don't know. I don't think it's very compassionate.
Lyon, what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, there's a point to being compassionate, but there's also a point to just what is realistic.
Mm.
And I think in order to do that, the trans community just has to have more conversations within its own spaces of what is like the common thing to do, what is like the decent thing to do. And I think most trans people, because like we have to understand that like TRAs are 17-year-olds with anime profiles on Twitter, but most trans people out there are not TRAs. They're not posting like weird gender fuckery like every 20 seconds.
Just to kind of quickly jump in there, I know I probably shouldn't do that. I do agree when you say that the majority of trans people aren't TRAs. Like, I think that's an objective truth as far as I'm concerned. I would try and avoid falling into the pitfall though that these are just like the 17-year-olds with anime profiles. Bear in mind, a lot of these people, there are people who have basically have used entryism to get positions within companies, within various movements, and they are listened to by people with influence.
Yeah, you have people like Monroe Bergdorf and stuff like that. Like they
Travis
definitely exist. But if we're talking about like the practical application of people using like certain sexed bathrooms,
yes,
you know, then it starts to get a little different. But like, I think the problem is that I feel like the gender critical response is very dramatic to me, because it's like, okay, I understand that there might be a possibility that like there's this crazy trans person who does not transition in any meaningful way and then goes into the female bathroom. But like, first of all, how often do you really see a trans woman out? How often do you really see a trans woman in the bathroom at the same time that you're going to the bathroom? How often do you even notice that they're there? And then how often is it going to be one of these people who's like crazy? If I ask all of the female people that I know, I don't think anyone's going to like name a situation where this happened. So when people like do this very dramatic thing of like, oh, well, blah, 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 it's kind of like they're scared of like what could happen in theory, but not what's like actually happening.
So can anyone in here, like this might be a bit of a weird question, but just kind of building on that, can anyone remember the last time they saw a trans woman in the bathroom who wasn't them? So you can't say it was you.
I can't.
I am not trans, but I see trans women in the bathroom all the time because I live in one of the most liberal cities in the United States, and it actually draws trans people here. And then I also think that we have a community, and I'm not trying to be horrible or anything, but I do think that there are people who are truly trans who have gender dysphoria and stuff like that. And I do think that younger people, I mean, we've seen a huge increase in recently. And I've noticed, like, I have friends whose children are in groups, you know, like friendship groups, and all of them are trans somehow. That's not normal. And but I see a lot of trans people in the bathroom. But I mean, I think it has a lot to do with just where I live, and then also, you know, Portland. The school that I was attending was also a very liberal school. So,
where do you live?
It's not Portland, is it?
No, I live in Washington. I live in Washington State. I'm not going to say which city I live in.
That's fine.
Just for my own safety. But I live in Washington State, and I live in a very, very, very liberal city. So,
as long as it's not Chaz.
Thank God. Thank God it's not Chaz. But I'm about an hour away from Chaz.
Or at least what was Chaz. So when you say that you see trans people in the bathrooms all the time, just so we know, are these trans women or are these NBs?
Trans women.
Trans women.
As far as we know. We don't know how they identify.
Well, I do know how they identify. Well, because the trans women that I've seen have been at my school. And I do know how everyone identifies, because at the beginning of every single class, we all had to go around and introduce our pronouns.
Jesus Christ.
I'm cringing.
Jesus Christ, that's bad. In the schools as well.
Yeah, and I'm 30, and I went to college, you know, later in life. So like I'm sitting here a little bit like older than everyone else, and they're all like, you know, 18, 19 years old. And I'm like, okay, well, I got in a lot of trouble for saying that my pronouns were obviously he, her, because that was very, very offensive to people.
See, that's what I generally do in those situations. Every single time, if I'm asked what my pronouns are, I grab my tits, push them together, and say, "What do you think?"
Right.
Every single time. And then the response that I always get is just like she, her, then she, her. And it's like, yeah, you're damn right it is. Because I have worked for this. Like, sorry, I hate like asking pronouns so much.
About how you never can tell what someone's pronouns. I said, I am obviously she, her. And my professor said, no, you're not obviously anything because no one can tell someone's pronouns by looking at them.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Anyway, Fionne, so what about you when it comes to bathrooms? Because you actually use the men's bathroom, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long have you been using the men's bathroom for, if you don't mind me asking?
I can't remember. It's been definitely over a year now. I don't know if it's been over 2, to be honest.
Mm.
But it's all kind of ended because of the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
So
how has that been for you?
Really interesting. Because now I question whether I need female spaces to be part of my transition or not. I have another friend who basically made the same kind of like, well, I don't want to be involved with this kind of attack on women's rights anymore, so I'm going to do this too. But then she's like fully transitioned. She's one of those people like you would not know a trans unless they told you.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, she passes very well.
Yeah, and she had a very like creepy encounter. I've had nothing but like kind of positive experiences. I always walk in absolutely terrified, then walk out like, thank God I live in the UK. We are like so cool with each other. We kind of like shrug at eccentricity, and like there's even been a bit of like confused chivalry, which is kind of like my validation. So it's like, oh, I feel like a princess now. Do you know what I mean? When they like hold the door open for you and stuff, and it's that's quite nice. And so I'd rather that than kind of the deer in the headlights smiles from women and trying to be very accommodating and kind of like, you know, that makes me dysphoric. So
what do you mean by deer in the headlights?
So do you know, like, because obviously I think this is the thing. There's so many people. I've talked like Leon was saying earlier. That like no woman's talking about like the last time they encountered a trans woman in the bathroom, and I've talked to like hundreds of women who have been in this situation.
But you're the queen of like gender critical people, so that doesn't surprise me.
No, I know, but I mean, it was only the week I was talking to a blue tick woman who was like, I don't want to talk to this about in this situation, but like she walked into a changing room at a swimming pool, and there was like a bloke sat there, and she's like, there was nothing to tell me he wasn't just a bloke, and she was like, you're in the wrong changing rooms, get out. And he was like, I'm a woman. and she was
God damn it.
And so then, you know, deer in the headlights, kind of like, I don't want this situation to escalate. I'm in a vulnerable space. Thank God I'm not a girl.
Whenever I've been, because I've been in everything from like, you know, changing rooms, bathrooms and all of that. And like, I've never had any issues at all with using them. And I've never had anyone say anything or look at me. I mean, like when you're trans, especially in the early transition, you do kind of get that sixth sense of when someone is looking at you. Right? I mean, I've definitely had that. I mean, Leon, you must have same with Fionne.
When I was like pre-hormones, I would like every time I went to the bathroom in public, I would just make a tactical decision. Like, what is the situation? How many people are there? What kind of vibe is this? Like, who's around? And then I would choose a bathroom. So I get that.
Yeah. And so it's why it is like, I don't think it would be fair to just like dismiss like the, you know, the kind of situation that Fionne's friend found herself in, where there was basically Big Bertha sitting in the middle of the changing room, pint of Tetleys in hand.
Well, I think that's actually interesting to bring up, because I think I made a tweet right after the like initial exchange about the Father's Day thing. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that we have to understand that in general, most trans people suffer with a moderate degree of like discrimination from the people around them.
Right.
Like, on average. So it's like, it's understandable that people in the trans community are very defensive and they're very hard line, like, oh, I say I'm a woman, thus I am a woman in every way, shape, or form, which obviously makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's their defensive like opinion. But the problem is, if we're going to have people in the trans community like engaging with these people, we can't have people in the background liking our tweets, retweeting them, like these gender critical people, and then they have other tweets that are like, oh, the fucking Tims and the AGPs, the fetishists. Like, we can't have all that, because if they see that, they're never going to engage with it. They're never going to engage with like reasonable discussion.
I agree with that. Can I don't want to.
Yeah. Oh, no, please.
So I completely agree with that. I feel like there's a lack of respect going on. I think that, this should have been a discussion, and it was never a discussion. And that's the problem. And then I think that people got very defensive on both sides. Women have been oppressed for years. And, and we don't, so like in the gender critical space in the community, we don't like being called TERFs. We don't like being called cis. Yet there's so many gender critical women who will turn around and misgender and call people Tims and call people. And it needs to be a mutual thing. If you don't want to be called something, then you need to stop calling people things that, they say, this hurts me. So stop doing it. And I have been very vocal about that. And I think that that's maybe why Lyon suggested me for this, because I am gender critical, but I'm very, very quick to call out my own community, because I think it is imperative for both of us in both of our communities to be calling out and condemning bad behavior. Otherwise, nobody's going to take each other seriously. We're all just going to think, oh, these few people who are being assholes are what this community is about. And that's just not true. And we should be having conversations. We should be respecting each other. But unfortunately, there are people that are hiding under umbrellas when it comes to the trans rights activists and when it comes to the gender critical community. I have seen so many just transphobic, horrible, horrible men and women who don't even know what gender critical means. They think that gender critical means critical of transgender people. And that is not what gender critical means at all. It means that you're critical of gender in itself. You're critical of gender stereotypes, and you think that they're harmful and that they should basically be abolished. That is what gender critical actually means. But a lot of people, since they see gender critical people talking about trans ideology and all of that, they assume it automatically means that you are critical of trans people. And that is not what it means at all. So these people are not even actually gender critical feminists. They're just hiding under a gender critical umbrella so that they can be transphobic. And I think it is integral for us to be calling that out and condemning that behavior, because otherwise people are not going to take us seriously, and they're going to just say our movement is transphobia.
Now, I am really glad that you said that, especially with the case about the gender critical side often using phrases like Tim, and like using male pronouns, even for people who've done everything to transition, because it's always felt a bit hypocritical to me when I try not to use the word TERF, because I know they don't like it. I try not to use the word cis, and I'll use them within context because that's my freedom to do so, but I won't call them that.
Right.
And then
I'll never use those words. I do not call anyone TIF. I do not call anyone Tim. I do not gender. It's just because I don't want to be called cis and I don't want to be called TERF, and it's a two-way street of respect. So.
So, Fionne, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I really want to answer my thoughts on that, but is there... Sorry, I'm asking a really out there question. Is there a way I can view this full screen? Because I can't read what's in the middle.
I actually was thinking that too.
Let me zoom in. Let me zoom in.
I want to know what everyone else is seeing. Oh, this is when you... Yeah, right, I know what we're looking at.
This is when somebody transed me. They thought I was trans.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
Because I called out that behavior.
you AGP always think you like that's this is another quick point I want to raise. AGP isn't just people who you don't like. AGP is like, it's one of those things where I keep on thinking, is it a thing or is it not?
Oh, it's a thing.
But then, like the other day, I came across a account which I'm not going to share on here because this is a real person. But this was someone like a trans woman who's had proper tribal tattoos on her face. looked like Barry the bricklayer. And I had a look at her Facebook, her Twitter feed. It was nothing but selfies of herself in her underwear or of her legs, and then posting porn.
No, I'm
like,
AGPs
not
definitely
a
exist.
fetish.
Unfortunately, they do exist. But the thing that most people don't understand is that most AGPs are not trans, and not in the sense of like, oh, they're not real trans. No, they actually like don't transition, and they don't want to transition.
Yeah,
like they're just men who like that's their fetish. I've known
Blanchard actually protested that orthogonophiles were much more likely to go through the full surgery, whereas homosexual transsexuals were much more indifferent about their genitals.
Really?
Yeah. Because it fulfills like lesbian, sorry to be crude, but badge on badge fantasy that they have.
I would say that's not necessarily true, but I think what is true, this is kind of off topic, just real quick.
No, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt again because I think people confuse AGP with kind of like truck driving cross-dresser. And I think that's what people have in their heads, when really it could be the kind of fully transitioned transsexual sat there in the women's group knitting.
Well, that's the rare type,
I mean, I always go for the trucker stereotype because that's what I see. That's like the most kind of glaring one. Like, I mean, I remember when I had my gender reassignment surgery, and there was someone in there who kept on going on about like first thing she was going to do after she was let out of the hospital, she's going to go down to Feathers for a pint of bitter. And I'm like, because it's first because she's a character. She's a character, and they all love her there.
Tell anyone about that.
And then like the worst bit was when she was like, "This is going to get." I don't know. I probably shouldn't say the worst. I won't go into too much detail for the worst thing that she did. But all I will say was that she got very, very, very excited over doing a painful and mundane thing that all trans women have to do after they've had their surgery. And I will leave it at that.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we continue the conversation, I know a couple of super chats have come in, so I'm just going to quickly read them out before we continue. So I don't want people to feel like they're being ignored. So let's start off. Yes, the eunuch. Let's kick this off. All right. If Bruce Jenner is allowed to be Caitlyn Jenner, why isn't Rachel Dolezal allowed to be black? Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well. And this is where the gender critical people will probably not agree, is that race and gender are both a social construct, but they're social constructs in different ways. Race is obviously like phenotypical, and then there's like some genetic like differences on average, but that's just regional. But gender is more of a social construct in the sense that like we all have ancestors that are male and female. And I think a lot of the behavioral aspects of male and female can sometimes appear sex atypical, right? So if we're talking about, for instance, like homosexuals are sex atypical, right? So it's not necessarily the identifying as the other gender doesn't make sense, but there is a sort of innateness that makes you akin to the opposite sex in some way. Whereas with race, that's not really the case. Like you can't be born like maybe you're born a little tan, but you don't have like an innate like neurology that is more similar to a certain race. That's not a thing.
But you just said race was a social construct. So wouldn't that then follow that if you had been brought up in like a neighborhood with a lot of one type of race, that you, even if you weren't that type of race, you'd picked up some of those traits?
No, because that would be cultural. And whereas with like sex, there's like actual neurological like there's like being homosexual is innate, right? And it's pretty obvious that homosexuals on average, even when they're 3 years old, have traits that are more typical of the opposite sex. And there have been studies on this, which is kind of explains the homosexual transsexual thing. And that's not really the same as like a neurological similarity to a different race. That's cultural.
Okay.
I don't want to like. Are you? I don't wanna,
No. If you got something to add.
I think that I think in general the comparison of race and gender is so fallacious and it needs to be buried and stopped. They're not the same thing. They're completely different. And gender is more complex, and this is why I think that you guys do need to be gatekeeping. And I'm not trying to say like you guys. I know that that's probably problematic. You ladies.
I know I am a gatekeeper. I'm a proud gatekeeper.
No, but you ladies should be gatekeeping.
I'm the Donald Trump of the trans world.
I tried to beat Rose on Dark Souls, and she was the hardest boss.
And the reason I feel like you need to be gatekeeping is because saying that trans people can be trans without dysphoria it becomes a problem, because the reason why it's not. I mean, I do understand why a lot of women find it to be appropriation, because sometimes it really does feel like appropriation, but a lot of times it has to do, and it's so complex, it has to do with, hormones that you're exposed to while in utero. And it's same thing with a lot of gay men, especially like, I know that there's studies that say like, if a woman has been pregnant with a boy multiple times, it actually increases the chance of her having a gay son exponentially. And it just has a lot to do with the hormones that you are exposed to in utero. It's just, there is complex things that are going on there. And I think that that's the whole reason why it really does need to be there needs to be a lot of gatekeeping there, because just saying, oh, I'm trans because I feel like it, but I don't actually have any gender dysphoria, I don't actually have anything. It's kind of like, it becomes this thing where people are like, well, I don't take that very seriously. Because there really is a difference, when you start thinking about, the way that a baby is, being exposed to hormones and their brain is developing and stuff like that in utero, in comparison to a race, which is something that like is just the color of your skin, something that you can't. I mean, both of these things are things that you can't change, but I think that the comparison is just very fallacious, and when it comes to this conversation, and then also when it comes to the segregation, they're not the same thing.
Oh, that's a good point. Anyway, I want to let's just carry on going quickly through some of the super chats, and we'll get right back into the meat. So the real Bamboonga with the $5. Can you say them sweet pronouns? It's my favorite Dawn Roseism. Them sweet pronouns.
Sweet.
Moy Felicita with the 20 DKK. Is there a viable compromise between either side? I think that is something which we're probably going to be getting into later on, I'm sure. Mars with the $5. This didn't happen because women were being too polite. This situation is because liberals be too liberal, and you all waited too long to speak out. I do think there is a little bit of truth in that. I mean, I always find the phrase liberal, when Americans use it, to be kind of a bit, I don't know, because in the States, liberal is considered like left wing, whereas like I have more of a classic liberal outlook. So like I think that a lot of the things that the trans lobby pushes for are exceedingly illiberal, but I understand where Mars is coming from. Does anyone have anything to say on that?
Love you, Mars.
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
I know.
No, I'm not involved in other kinds of politics, so I wouldn't say I'm centrist, but I'm really, at the moment, I'm really interested in pluralism, which from my understanding is that we kind of have to allow everybody to have their own different beliefs, and so long as they don't compromise other people's. And I think we all kind of want, well, I think the majority of people want that kind of society. But I don't know.
Pluralism, I thought you were going to go into something else.
All right, and let's move on. So Laisha with the £2. For what it's worth, Morgan Auger told the kids to call them mom. Yeah, that sounds like a thing Auger would do. Karina Cohn with the $1.99. Leon, women are losing their jobs for criticizing.
That's not right.
Right.
Well, I mean, it is.
Of course, that's a thing that happens. But the point is that we're not going to stop that from happening by calling people Tims and AGPs, right? It's not going to be easy to like dismantle these like liberal, hyper progressive ideas that like, oh, I identify as X and thus I am X in every like conceivable way, which is the problem.
Laisha with another £2. Security isn't probability, it's potential impact. Yeah, I understand that. Mars, again, with the $5. There are valid concerns from both sides, but what are we actually going to do to solve them now? Create more restrooms? Guard restrooms? Be realistic. Again, that's something which we're going to get into. And finally, before we get back on topic, Stephanie looks at the $5. Thank you so much for hosting this conversation and also for having empathy for biological women and the ways this impacts us. Well, thanks for tuning in. So anyway, so let's kind of get back to where we were basically kind of leaving off. If I remember rightly, like we'd moved on from discussing phrases like Tim and Tiff, hadn't we?
I suppose so.
Can I say something about that?
What was that?
Could I say something about that?
Absolutely, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do kind of get there is a kind of that. I mean, there's no way to not make this sound tone policing, but I think there's a I think what the problem is that women are very can have very definite and well not pardon me.
That's all right.
Let me start again. Okay, so feminists can define themselves. And the kind of big ask over the past 5 years has been for trans people to define themselves in the face of trans women or women. And that's a very circular definition, because then it's like, well, what is a woman? And so, and then then the feminists will say adult human female, and the trans people will say anyone who identifies as a woman. And so it repeats itself, so it's circular. And so I think that kind of, I mean, I do understand there's heat and like slurs being thrown everywhere in this battlefield, you know, and so like there was a time when I was like, yeah, I'm a Tim, you know, and I used that Monty Python gift, you know, when there's like that guy on the bridge, and it was like there are some who call me Tim, and and so there's I mean, because this topic's such a hot potato, of course. We can't account for everybody saying everything. We can only really account for what we say. But I think if there's one tone policey thing that I'm going to say is that, I'm going to make it two things in case I don't get to slip it in later. The first thing is that neither side should be bringing in intersex conditions into this debate and using them as some kind of basketball or shield.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And two is, what was my second one? Hang on, it's going to come to me. I lose my train. This is what the thing is with live streams. You start talking and then you interrupt yourself.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
The second thing, the second thing is always when because we're discussing this all online, and so it's not always about the person that you are talking to, as much as it is the quiet onlooker. And someone may just have come into this discussion and be watching what you're talking about. And then if you're going off like calling people these random names, they're going to just think, well, you just look like a mean person and I don't really want to talk to you. So then everything that you're trying to get across gets lost. So I would say, oh God, I always said shoot me if I say both sides. I would say both sides could, I think it happens more on one side than the other, but could, you know, if you apply that, you're gonna affect change greater. I think sensible change that is gonna help people.
Leon, you look like you want to jump in there.
No, I was just waiting to respond. Well, when Fionne said like, oh, well, I think one side does it more than the other, like, okay, we know what you mean by that though. But I think the thing that we have to keep in mind, and this is going to be a really spicy take, but let's just go there. Okay. I think that in Western culture, trans people in general have more discrimination issues and more oppression issues than the average Western woman. Like, let's just be honest for a second. Like, how much are you actually dealing with on a day-to-day that is purely to do with you being a woman. I really strongly doubt that it is at the same level as the average trans person, and not just like fake trans people, like actual trans people deal with on a day-to-day. So I feel like if we're doing this whole thing of like, oh, well, maybe I'll see a trans person in a bathroom or like all of this, but like, it seems very odd to me, because if we compare that to the discomfort of like most trans people face, I mean, like, like just like 3 days ago, I was like almost violently assaulted in front of like a liquor store. And I'm not saying like my experience is universal, but like if you talk to trans people, reasonable ones, these things are very, very, very common, like on the daily.
So, like when you're saying that trans women are probably more, just to make sure I'm understanding, you're saying that you believe that trans women are more oppressed.
I would say trans people in general, just so
trans
that
people in general, right? And so just to make it clear, what kind of what examples would you be able to give?
Well, I think that the most like important example is the fact that if you are a woman in a Western society, you are generally given a space. You have a role to fulfill. You might break the boundaries of that role, and that might be a problem, but that's everyone. But you are given a place. You have something to like aspire to. You have a role to like stick in. And if you do, you'll be reasonably respected. But if we're talking about trans people in most spaces, so not just like your liberal little like insular city, I'm talking like rough neighborhoods in Scotland, like downtown Los Angeles, places I've been to. If you're a transsexual, the things that'll happen to you will be constant. The looks, the judgments. Oh, this person's disgusting. Oh, this person's vile. This person's mentally ill. That's like almost a majority opinion if we're talking about real life, not just like online, because I think a lot of people think that online is representative of what happens in real life, but it's not. You know what I mean?
So Mel, I wouldn't mind. Actually, no, Fionne wants to talk. So
I really want to reply to that. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I find a kind of like incongruence with what Lynn has generally been saying throughout this chat, with what she just said, because one minute she's using the females' bathrooms and never having any trouble, and then the next minute she can't go anywhere because everyone's recognizing that she's trans. And
no, I'm not talking about myself personally. I'm just talking in general.
Okay, but I just and the other thing that you said was like, you know, if women just kind of uphold their gender norms and follow that path and get to that position, then they'll be successful. And I mean, that just sounds really misogynistic to me.
Yeah, but you think a lot of things sound misogynistic. What I'm saying is, obviously the gender role is a problem, but if you are just an average woman, you're not going to have to deal with random, like half the population in Western culture thinking you're a disgusting fetishist or a deviant of some sort, let alone if we leave Western culture, where you'll probably get stoned to death unless we're in Iran or something.
Mel, what are your thoughts on what Fionne's bringing up?
I think that it's probably going to depend heavily on where you're living, because I know here I have several trans friends, and I actually have several trans friends that I've met online as well, just being in this discourse, who have said the opposite. They've said that people actually fall all over themselves to be accommodating and like give them special treatment and like be like very like kind. Whereas like in my life, you know, I've been fired for not engaging sexually with bosses. I have been paid. I remember seeing that I was being paid $2 less than my coworkers who were doing less than me. Just things like that. I think that it's easy to say, oh, women are experiencing less, but that's just not true. And also when you just take into account the centuries of oppression and abuse and how far we've come and stuff like that, I think that that's a lot of the reason why women are so defensive when it comes to the conversations about spaces, and when it comes to the conversations about all of this. It's kind of like the reason why I think we're so upset is it was never a conversation to begin with. We were told that this is the way it was going to be, and nobody gave a shit about how we felt, and nobody even said, hey, does this make you uncomfortable? You know, what do you think? It was never that. It was just, this is how it is. And I think that, you know, that's why I've been trying to say that the people on both sides need to chill the fuck out, because we need to actually have a conversation. But I think that it's easy for both sides to dismiss experiences and oppression and things like that. But and you talk about the Western world. Well, there's people that are being, getting female genital mutilation in the United States and in the UK that are part of like Muslim communities. Like that's happening still, even though they are in Western communities.
Right, but what do you think trans people in that same community would face?
Well, I know that gay people in those communities are actually being forced to transition because that's
not in like regular Muslim communities. That's a very specific like Iranian thing.
I think it's very specific in Muslim countries in general. But
well, you're talking about Muslim communities in the West, and as someone from the Netherlands, where there are far more like insular Muslim communities, there's definitely not going to be a thing of like, oh, the women are treated so much worse than, say, the homosexual or the transsexual.
But I think to deny that women, in those communities, in Western communities, like, I mean, they are facing female genital mutilation. They are facing severe sexism and misogyny. I mean, just the fucking hijab alone is just a misogynistic symbol. And those are very alive and very well in Western communities. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's disingenuous to say that misogyny is not still prevalent. And,
I've never said that though. I just said that transphobia is probably more prevalent in general.
I think that the majority of people that I know, even when it comes to gender critical people, were actually very, very accepting of trans people and wanting to help the trans community. I think that it wasn't really until we realized how it would affect women's rights that we had any kind of objection. Because I remember when, Caitlyn Jenner came out, I was like, yes, be who you are. That's awesome. Because I was always somebody who was like very pro gay marriage and pro, trans rights, all of those things. It wasn't really until I think the majority of gender critical women started seeing how it was starting to kind of overlap with women's rights that we had a problem. So do I deny? I'm not going to deny that there's transphobia. There's totally transphobia. And I've seen people and I've called it out within my own community because I think it's abhorrent and disgusting and it should not be allowed. It is integral to call that out because it's disgusting and it's unacceptable. But I don't think that it's pervasive with
women. Let's just speak about something factually then. So let's say, obviously, if you're a woman, you probably have more experience with what it is to be a woman and what misogyny looks like, right? And in the same token, if you're a trans person, you probably have a better idea of what transphobia looks like, right? Well, let's compare the two, because trans people in general are a very small minority of the population. So that's first of all. But women are half the population. So even if you're not female, you are exposed to women constantly in media, in culture, in your family, with your peers, with your friends, everywhere. It's impossible for you to not have some insight into what a woman's life approximately looks like. You won't have the perfect insight, but you'll have some. But if we're talking about just people in general, women and men included, how much do they really know about what it looks like to be a transsexual? How many actually know one in person, let alone have any kind of like substantial like view of what that would actually look like on a day-to-day? Almost nothing. So we can factually say that trans people probably have a better view of what a woman goes through than vice versa. I don't think that's arguable.
Apparently not.
So what do you mean by apparently not?
Well, I don't know. I just feel that whole rant was just kind of like, and what came before it was just kind of like, did not understand what women go through, and minimize what women go through. And
well, okay, but you're backtracking.
Let Fionne talk.
Isn't bothered about listening to what women are saying in this situation, really, unless it benefits them.
So do you think that Lyon ignores women?
I do think if the way it comes across to me right now is that Leo, I can kind of understand it. I kind of feel like it's the dysphoria talking. It's the kind of like, if I was just like, if I had half of what you had, I'd be living in greener grass.
Okay, but you're not addressing what I said factually, though. You're just saying like, oh, well, this comes across as this and this. But is it not factually true that trans people would have a better insight into a female experience than vice versa?
I'm trying to come across fairly. Wherever you can call it factually, you can call it.
Well, come across logically.
Yeah, call it whatever you want. I'm just trying to say this is how I'm perceiving it. So
Right.
you can say it's illogical and it's infactual. This is just how I perceive it.
Well, explain why. Explain what I said. Why it's false then.
Why what's false?
Would you disagree that trans people have a better insight in general, on average, of what women experience than what the general society of women or men know of the experience of trans people?
Okay, so sorry, that was a really long question. Can you shorten it?
Do you think that trans people understand women's experience better than vice versa?
Probably, on average, yes.
Okay, so you don't agree that
I don't think most women. I don't understand what I actually no. To be honest, I feel I have really mixed views about this because I think a lot of women feel and are a lot more are under like heavy constraints by gender that they probably can empathize with most trans women or most trans people by their extreme response to gender. Because I think most women have gone through a stage where they're just like, fuck this shit, and and become feminists. Do you know what I mean?
Half of trans people approximately are female.
Yeah, so I think but I mean, trans people are the people who are like, who have the most kind of visceral reaction to gender. It doesn't mean that they're right. It just means that it's really affected them.
But I don't think you've disproven what I said, because I think this is like a problem that I see constantly in gender critical spaces, and it has nothing to do with like denying that women face certain experiences, because obviously women face like a lot of bullshit. That's undeniable. But one is a lot more visible than the other, because if I go to gender critical like spaces, Reddit like Twitter threads, what is very apparent to me is that these people really have no conception of what a trans person looks like just in a day-to-day. So they only have this like stereotype in their mind of what they read on Mumsnet that week. But like they have these very strange, like there was a tweet recently, I think it was today, where it was like, well, you know how trans women aren't women because, and then they list 5 things that trans people very obviously experience. Like, men never tell them to shut up. Men never tell them to suck their dick. Like, men never police their looks. And I'm just like, in what universe are you existing that you think that this is like an experience that is accurate?
Like the only men who I can think of who would probably kind of fall in with that are your typical soy boys, leftist cooks, to use internet slang. Because they don't, you know, they want to feel radical. But if you're going into the real world, then absolutely, I don't think men aren't going to tell kind of yell at trans women or anything. I mean, I've certainly been yelled at by men, and I'm sure everyone here has been. Would you say that I've understood that?
Mm-hmm.
So Mel, I know you've just gone off camera.
Okay, so I just spilled water down my shirt. That's what that was. So I was trying to like be really nonchalant about it. Yeah. So my feelings about this whole thing is I don't think that anyone can actually experience what it feels like to be a woman until they're reasonably passing. And then at the same time, you also don't have the knowledge of what it's like to grow up as a child, and the way you're conditioned as a woman, like as a girl, to be kind and to never challenge people, and to basically, you know, stand still and look pretty, but not like don't assert yourself too much because people will think you're too masculine.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it took me a very long time, and then when I did, in that, you know, I opened Pandora's box. I just never shut up because I was just like, fun. But I was raised to be so quiet and so to myself, and so, you know, caring and giving to everyone else and not caring about myself. And I think that that's just such an, like, it's such an important factor that's being left out, is just the way that girls are raised so much differently than boys, and they're, you know, the way that they go through puberty and everything like that as well. And so I do think that men are more comfortable being misogynistic to women than they are to trans women, because they know that women are already kind of conditioned that way, and that, you know, and
I think you're giving men way too much credit in that situation. They're not having deep, like, gender critical, like, arguments in their head, like, about how they treat, like, a trans woman who's reasonably transitioned, obviously.
okay, but like when I see people like the way that they speak to trans women, you know, like that are definitely way more assertive than I am. Like my friend Rain, she's very, very assertive, and people just talk to her in a different way, you know, than they talk to me. And then, okay, so what is her name? Ladyboy Ace. Here's a very perfect example of this. Ladyboy Ace and I, we were both arguing the same position on something, and this person who came in, it would be one of those people that you called like a soy boy. He was just degrading me, insulting everything about me, insulting my looks, and saying that I was a fascist, saying I was this, saying I was that, even though Ladyboy Ace was saying the exact same things as I was. When he found out that she was trans, his entire tone changed, and he basically was like, yeah, no, we're cool. We can just agree to disagree. That's fine. You know, we're cool. We're cool. But then to me, he was like, you're a fucking bitch. You're a fucking fascist. You're this, you're that. And I'm just saying, it is, you can see it, the difference between the way that we're treated. And I'm not saying that that's all the time. And I'm never going to say that trans people are not oppressed or that they're not treated like shit, because I know they are. I've seen it. Like, I'm not fucking delusional. But it's a different experience. It's not saying that one is more, one's not more valid than the other. It's just that it's different.
Right, but I would say that was kind of my point, in that obviously these things occur, but I think a lot of people get kind of stuck on this view that what happens online with like these progressives that like, oh, you're trans, oh, here, let me take off, like let me like do everything for you. But like, if we go out into the actual world, into varied and like diverse spaces, one is a lot more common than the other. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think we all know that most men are not soy boys who are trying to cater to trans people.
Yeah.
Most men are like the guy at the truck stop, the guy at the bus station, your mailman, the guy, they're just everyday people.
For me, I think about where I live, and that's just very prevalent, and that's kind of like what the majority of people, I mean, I think it's so subjective, just depending on where you live. I feel like if I lived in the Midwest, or if I lived in like Florida or Arizona, it would be a completely different situation, because people would be maybe more like what you're talking about. But here, they're definitely more, they're all about catering, you know, because like it's a very liberal space. It's a very like, what can I do for you? It's a completely different atmosphere. So I think that you really have to take into account where people are living and, you know, the people that they're surrounded by, because that's not what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing people who are like, you're, you know, they're not really being horrible to trans people. In fact, I feel like it's almost infantilizing, you know, just how they're falling over themselves to accommodate trans people, which I think is almost more offensive, because it's kind of like, oh, they think that you can't stand up for yourself or talk about yourself, you know, because it's the same thing with race as well here. It's just kind of, it's very infantilizing, where they think that they need to
but we can't like get caught up in like our personal experiences. I'm talking about like what generally happens. And I think deep down, we probably all agree that the opposite is more common. We're not like, most places are not like a liberal city with like an art college over there and a Starbucks over there and a Whole Foods over there. That's not really common.
It's impossible to say, okay, we can all agree on this, when that doesn't fit our experiences, and that's not what I've seen.
Yeah, but that's the point. It's not all about your experience. It's about having a wide scope of what society probably looks like. Like, you can't base like everything off of just your experiences, because if we all did that, we would have all nonsensical views.
I mean, you live in the Netherlands, which is probably one of the most liberal places in the universe, and I imagine.
Yeah, and I've also lived in various places across the world, including ghetto areas of Los Angeles, and most recently, a quite rough neighborhood in Scotland. So again, mixed bag there.
Can I throw something in?
Yeah, of course.
Just before we skirt past this entire topic,
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw in that like I think there is a real like kind of brotherhood situation that happens maybe just online. I don't know about the real world, but definitely online between men viewing each other. Like I think there's a lot of men out there who love this chance to kind of be totally chivalrous to trans women at the same time hating on other women. And we're so quick to I've forgotten his name now, but there was a guy recently who what did he do? He did something really bad. He got I think he got Baroness Nichols or I don't know Nichols. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Nicholson,
But,
is it?
Nicholson kicked off her title. Oh, was it her? I feel like I'm getting my stories
I thought
mixed up.
Baronesses couldn't lose their titles.
Not titles. Oh my god, I've got this totally confused. Anyway, he did something shitty to a GC woman.
Yes, Baroness Nicholson. That's her name.
Yeah, I think unless I've got this confused between Alison. Oh, I may have got this confused. But he's come out with so many like transphobic comments in the past, and they've recently surfaced because GC people looked into it, and the GC people called it out, like saying it's not cool to do this. And he was quick to apologize. And from the little I can see of the trans community now, because they've all blocked me, is there was no calling out. They're all really quick to forgive him because it's a bros club. And then
like I'll add there that I didn't see anyone condemning him at all, which I found fascinating. I found absolutely fascinating because I've been following cancel culture for years. I know the rules of it, and it's just interesting when someone who's effectively with the in crowd, because the wrong people are the ones who are bringing it up, all of a sudden it's not an issue.
Yeah, and anyway, this is just my experience, but to back this up, I think it was only at the start of this year I went to a feminist meeting. What was it called? Make More Noise in Manchester.
Right.
And Posey Parker was one of the speakers. And so, you know, there was people from all kinds of hardlines there. And someone stood up in the middle of the meeting, a woman, and she was like, what do you mean, trannies? Or something along those lines. And other women stood up in that meeting and said, "Oi, we don't accept that language." And so I think people have GC people really wrong. Like, they are quick to call each other out. And it's the point where it's like sometimes I don't want to step in as much as like if someone was being interphobic, it's like it's kind of on the GC side particularly. It's like I would rather see the intersex voices that I know get their point across. And I know that happens too, because we both use these people as a shield and as a bouncing ball. And so it's like these are the best to speak about this issue, but these women do, even at in the situations that you would think would be the most radicalized, and taking radicalized as meaning some kind of crazy and not what radical feminism means, which means attacking an issue or addressing an issue at the root. In this case, it's sex. So, you know, when people I just wanted to throw that in there while we're on it. I think there's this bros club that's going on where men who are previously very misogynistic, previously don't give a shit about trans people, and they found a perfect excuse to hate women under this banner. And it's so obvious, it's everywhere.
I would really love to see people in the trans activist community start calling each other out the way that gender critical feminists do. Because there's many of us that are like, this is unacceptable, this is abhorrent, unacceptable behavior, don't do this. And these people are not actually usually gender critical, they're just using our title. They don't know what it means.
Like a no true Scotsman pussy.
But I've never seen that. I've never ever seen that in the trans activist community. And I know that trans activists, like a lot of trans people, the majority of trans people probably are not even trans activists. The majority of trans activists that I have dealt with have been not trans. So, but I would love to see people within that community say, hey, stop threatening people, stop threatening rape, stop threatening death. That's fucking unacceptable. You know, use your words and have a conversation, because that you don't get anything done by saying die turf die, suck on my dick die. Like that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, but bear in mind that a lot of these are the same kinds of the same kind of circles where you get the more kind of radical online left. These are the kinds of people who try and spout memes like punch a Nazi, like kill fascists and stuff, when they're not even really explaining what they mean by Nazi and fascist. Like, a lot of the people who they consider to be far right actually aren't. They're just people, they disagree with them. And you'll never see in those circles someone saying, oh, hey, don't say that. And so a lot of it is that I think one of the things from my, I shouldn't kind of be jumping in and putting in my view in this thing, because it's mostly I'm here to moderate. But just to kind of make my point, I think a lot of people focus on the kind of the misogyny angle when it comes to the trans debate, and that the trans activists are motivated by misogyny and homophobia. Those are two phrases that I've seen thrown around a lot. But what people seem to be kind of missing out is what the actual ideology itself stems from. I mean, where does kind of queer theory ultimately come from? Who are the people who parrot and push such a narrative? Well, a lot of them are political radicals. Like, this is why I always make the point. You never find a non-binary person who's a centrist. All of them come from the radical left. And when they do that, that's the kind of language which the radical left always uses. What you're seeing is that it's bleeding over into a debate on identity, when ultimately two sides that really are on the left, like both in general, the radical feminists and the trans activists are both left-wing movements. But because they have one massive disagreement, like they're basically one is fair game to the other. And because the trans movement, like I think Mel said earlier, like a lot of Mel and Leon, I think as well, like did make the point that a lot of them are younger. And yeah, I suppose I do have to agree with you on that, and that a lot of them are quite young, because young people don't really think through what they're actually saying. Like, they're young and impressionable. They've been to universities where they've been told that they have to fight the oppression. And so that's where I'm kind of coming from when a lot of them are using these kinds of language. They're using it because not so much because they hate women, but because what they see is they're fighting against genuine evil, which I think is ultimately a lot worse, because it shows just how unhinged and like away from reality these people actually live. Does any of that make sense?
That makes complete sense to me, yeah.
I wanted to ask a question earlier, Rose.
Yeah.
Saying, it's like, because you were there reporting on Jessica and Eve, and before Jessica and Eve, you were reporting on Jess Bradley.
Yes.
And did you not feel in that situation like a bit shocked by the silence of other trans voices, like popular trans voices? I know Blair White stands out. But while that was going on, did that not strike you? Because it struck me.
It did and it didn't. The reason for that is I've been around the queer community. I've seen how it generally operates. And when you get these big name queers, so to speak, they do develop a kind of immunity to criticism. People will do everything they can to stop them from being brought down. I've seen this happen with someone in real life who was considered a quote unquote big name queer, career queer, if you will, in London, who was trying to make it as a poet whilst there, because they were a they, despite the fact they was blatantly a woman. Their family was like very middle to upper class, and basically just paid them to doss around. But this was quite an abusive person who did some quite nasty things to some friends of mine. And when they were called out on it, everyone was basically told, like, shut up. Eventually, the muscle would move in and basically get everyone to be quiet. And so, on the one hand, it doesn't surprise me that this happened. But on the other hand, the level of silence, the fact that, like, there's very, very little leaks about it, like, no one is slipping up. And the thing is, there's definitely something which has happened there because, like, you know, the fact that Brad has completely disappeared off the internet. I know that Bradley still had things to do with the NUS. And the reason why I talk about Bradley so much is because Bradley had access to a lot of young, vulnerable people, had pushed very, very radical politics, and basically got away scot-free. And there were plenty of trans people, trans activists who were aware of what Bradley did. None of them called them out. Nobody called out Jess Bradley. And there was a lot of people in positions to do so. And a lot of people could have, you know, helped the vulnerable people that Brad has impacted. It's kind of like the Jessica Yaniv situation, where you had people like Kat Black who only spoke out against Yaniv because it was a way of saying, oh, don't tell us to speak out against Yaniv. Otherwise, in the name of
they were literally dragged by their teeth to condemn Yaniv and Bradley. And did anyone even condemn Bradley, other than like a select few trans people?
Well, no one did. Brad. I mean, in Brad's defense, Brad's wasn't a particularly big name. I only started to kind of find out more about them because I got very interested in the NUS trans campaign, and from there I learned about Brad's and how extreme they are. Like we're talking like a communist.
He was certainly at most of the meetings that women were trying to, and this ties into something Mel said earlier. It's like Mel was saying both sides need to have a polite discussion about what we're going to do here. But the thing is that women set out to have this discussion and were met with no debate. And Jess Bradley was at half of these debates or discussions, protesting outside in a balaclava, literally stopping women getting into the meeting. They had to climb over the bastard.
I believe it's Julie Bindle's footage from We Need to Talk, where you can actually see Jess Bradley in it.
Yeah,
I'm sure it is, because like I've been watching. I'd watched it with like my friends, and they were just like, "Yep, that's Brad's." So yeah, the frustrating thing with Brad's is at this point, I genuinely like all the kind of the leads have dried up. Like the NUS is shut down. Nobody connected to it is talking anymore. Bradley has completely disappeared off the face of the earth. I'm still trying to find out information as and when I can, but at this point, the only thing that I know is that it was a police matter. So I don't know whether it's gone to court, and I don't know if it has gone to court, whether Bradley has been sent down, which is a possibility.
There's nothing worse than a spider you can't see that you saw 2 minutes ago. But I do commend you, Rose. You've been whistleblowing about this stuff like forever. So,
well, it's what I do.
Up to you.
It's what I do. Anyway, there's kind of two more parts of the debate that I want to hit on. One is just kind of a quick thing, really, which is just kind of talking about the when you mentioned it earlier about how, you know, like the door is opened on kind of being trans, and I know we touched on it earlier, but I just kind of want to go over it again real quick, because one of the things that I've always talked about is that there needs to be a gate on the term. Like you can't have an open border on what it is to be trans, because I believe that's what's led us to the mess. Not so much that trans women have been using these spaces, but rather that now the definition of being a trans woman has got so loose that you end up with people who would have otherwise have been cross-dressers or transvestites now being able to use the trans loophole as a way of getting in. And that's the thing which I think a lot of the more kind of critical trans people, Leon, I think you might agree with me on this. I know certainly the likes of Blair and Mars do, because we've talked about it a couple of times. But Fionne, I was wondering, like, your kind of opinion on that.
No, I think if the boundary was sex, it would be much more stable, and we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. If trans people 20 years ago had fought for trans spaces, I wouldn't have to. And the thing is I'm so hated now. No one's going to agree with what I have to say. So it's just kind of it is going to have to be women have to get mean. They have to just say no. It is this whole situation has fallen on women's shoulders, and it's intensifying. And there's good transsexuals that are out there. I know they would never harm anybody. They're doing good things, and like They're lovely people, and they're gonna like be in a stressful situation because trans activism doesn't exist.
So, do you think that it would be right to group in them with the bad actors?
They're just grouped in with men. Trans women are men. So as soon as you let some men in, you just open the door.
So you don't think that this has anything to do with kind of a definition of what it is to be trans, but more just the fact that trans people are trying to use these spaces in the first place? You think that's what's led to this?
I mean, just as much as a homosexual, transsexual still doesn't understand the full thing of being a woman.
That's not a
went too earlier.
Let Fionne finish first, and then you can respond.
I don't think there's any policeable thing about this. And the only policing I see from people saying, you know, true trans kind of debates is, oh well, once you pass a certain way, it's cool. And I don't think it is, because women aren't just dickless men. And so we just entered that stage, and even homosexuals have proven in this debate that they're completely capable of misogyny. They're completely capable of disregarding women's feelings and minimizing them, and I think we've seen some of that even here tonight.
So when you say here tonight, do you mean Lyon?
Maybe.
Just say it, Fionne. You can call me out. Trust me, I'll do the same.
I do think earlier you were minimizing what women have to deal with in the West.
Right. I minimized it by saying that transphobia is probably more prevalent.
Yeah, I think you did, because I don't think it is. Well, I can only go off England because that's where I live, but I don't think transphobia is as big as misogyny.
Right. Okay. Well, let's just go back to the bathroom for a second, because
we have already discussed a lot of that, and I don't want it to get more derailed on that. But let's kind of talk about the bathrooms then.
Yeah, because we have this whole thing of like, well, who's really trans, blah blah blah, and we can go into that. But I mean, I have an unorthodox view, and I think that a transsexual is someone who transitions, not dysphoria haver, because that could include like detransitioners technically.
Yeah.
But with the bathroom situation, first of all, let's just be honest, bathrooms specifically, there's never really been a significant amount of problems with the bathroom situation, statistically. Right. So we're really only talking about like, in theory, or, oh, I saw a trans woman and I got nervous.
We're not, right? Women do talk about this. It doesn't all reach the news, but women are uncomfortable with this situation.
Okay, but there's no statistical
particularly feel like they can't speak out about the situation, or they'll lose their jobs. This is the situation we're in now. It's like, do you want to participate in the perpetuation of that or not?
I mean, you keep trying to frame this as like women being like these like eternal victims of this situation, when you're completely ignoring the fact that there's a bathroom situation that is not in favor of trans people to begin with. And then you're crying about like, oh, well, maybe
that's where we need to do some trans activism.
Right, but that's not going to happen if we have people like you.
Not when nobody doesn't want to give up empowerment. It's not going to
okay, guys, don't talk over each other. If that's okay. I need to
about the bathroom. Let's just like analyze one thing first, because Fionne says that the barrier should be sex, right?
Right.
But that's a very simplistic way of viewing the problem, because sex isn't actually, it's the correlation to the problem. It's not the actual problem, because if we're talking about, for instance, a 6-year-old boy going with his mother into the women's bathroom, that boy is a male, but he lacks the essential component which makes it a problem, right? So it's not actually sex, it's the correlated traits that males have. So if we're talking about trans women who are male but have transitioned, they are the most atypical males in existence.
Look at their pants to make sure that they've transitioned?
No, I would say there just has to be a barrier of like basic transition.
I mean, if it kind of helps clarify things, when I talk about the kind of trans woman that I respect. Because I'm often told that, oh, I just misgender and belittle everyone I disagree with, which isn't the case. What I mean is you need to at least make some effort if you want them sweet, sweet pronouns. I had to use that phrase because someone asked me to. but it does kind of come back to it. And that's why when it comes to the bathroom debate and the general way in which trans women should be treated, it's why I think it's very important that there is a border on what it means. And people, if they want to have that respect, they should have to meet a set criteria. I mean, being a woman is not ours to define. And I think a lot of trans women would agree with that, because otherwise, what the hell are we transitioning to? If we're going to redefine what the hell it means.
If you want to, you can do this with anything. You could say, I want people to treat me like a scary monster, and you could get all that Lorde. Is it Lorde? I don't know what they're called. You know, like Eurovision Gothic monster band thing is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you could do that.
And people would treat you like a scary monster.
Yeah, and so I think it's like a case of like, it's a case of illustrations and canvases for me. So I've said this on other streams, but it's kind of like the way you present, or the kind of like vibe you give off. You know, you can't force other people to kind of intake that vibe. And that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah,
it's
you can't.
Maybe somebody looks at your picture. Maybe you've drawn a really calm painting, and somebody else looks at it and goes, "Oh, that's a bit eerie." And you know, but that's what's kind of cool about that. It's kind of like people can see into it what they want.
Yeah, but you can at least always have a generalization of it. I mean, yeah, you should not be able to tell people by law how they should be referring to you. I mean, I've always been against that. I've always spoke out against that, and I've always been very consistent on that. But you can have a kind of generalized approach to it. Like, I honestly, it's been years since I was ever misgendered. Like, so I'm clearly doing something right.
Because you make a concerted effort to actually look like the gender that you're wanting to be addressed as, which is
right.
Then arguably, is the law protecting you in any way, and does it need to? Because your illustration is so good. The power of your illustration is getting you where you want to be. And does the law, if then a woman turned around and said get out, and then you decided to take her to court or get her job, like rip the job from under her feet, would you be favored in law? And I think right now that's what we're seeing.
Right.
So it's arguable. I think there is an argument that if the true trans argument is that you don't actually need any laws, you just need to do it well.
Yes.
And so in the similar vein, then out of everybody here, I'm the only one doing any trans activism.
You're the only one doing any trans activism.
Well, I don't mean that really, but I just mean in that vein. It's kind of like you have to do this, that, and that to have access to women's space.
Right.
And trying to just care about people with dysphoria by saying we need to start fighting for our own spaces. We need to start thinking about that. We should have started thinking about that 20 years ago.
So how would you? So let's talk about these other spaces.
Okay.
Like how would you implement this?
I would think that it should be. I mean, it's already implemented. The International Building Society have come out and said that they're going to supply third spaces, and that they need to because of trans people. And what we're seeing in the UK is that we're seeing the women's get rebranded gender neutral. I think if that's going to happen out of all cases, it should be the men's that gets rebranded. For a start, I think women's spaces is much more needed than the men's. And I don't see how that affects trans men. My second thing is I think that trans women probably need a separate cubicle. Like I was saying earlier, when it comes to things like gyms, and so they can't be showering in communal spaces. And I mean, it's kind of shocking that communal showering even happens, but
I never use a communal shower. I find I always use a separate cubicle for myself. I find, but that's just me.
Yeah. So those places, it's not actually a big impossible shift. We're on the cusp of it, but it could be done better with some proper advocacy.
But how would you do it in the vast majority of the buildings in this country which haven't been built to that specification? Would you request that they build a new?
That's the thing, is you can't do it in that situation. So this isn't something that we have to look to be legislated in the law and implemented tomorrow. It's something that is going to take time and advocacy.
Should this not be something that's left up to the individual establishments to sort out, rather than the government to tell them they have to do it?
Well, yes, and that's where our advocacy comes in, is that we tell them how to do it right. We tell them, don't just change the women's rooms into a gender neutral space. If anything, change the men's. If you can't do that, we need an additional space.
Which most places do have an additional space, don't they? Like, I mean, I don't know about in the US, we all have, there's usually 3 bathrooms. There's usually men's, women's, and then there's like a, family bathroom, which is like a single stall, like private bathroom. And why, I don't understand why that could not be the, gender neutral, anyone can use that. And then it kind of protects everyone's privacy, because I've talked to trans women who say that they're very uncomfortable in either bathroom. It doesn't matter if it's the female bathroom or the male bathroom, they feel uncomfortable in both. So
I've talked to trans men who feel the same as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's where real trans activism lies in. We have to define ourselves the same way women have. We could borrow a lot of what feminism has done by just being very clear about ourselves.
Can I just quickly point out, we appear to be bombarded with people saying that Sargon has sent them over. So
why would Sargon be interested in this?
I don't know. No, I think he like saw my link on Parler, so I think he's watching.
I think he's a chaser, to be honest.
No,
I don't know who that is. I feel like
Sargon's lovely.
He gives me chaser vibes, though. I'm not saying chaser is bad, but he gives me chaser vibes.
He's not. Don't worry. That's scrum.
Check his internet history.
Anyway, so Leon, what do you think about this idea of like a mandatory third space for trans people?
I'm completely down for the third space.
Right.
I think what the problem will be that maybe people don't foresee is that a lot of people that are not like gender critical or that know a lot about trans people are going to be like, why? Because they just don't see the issue of the system as it already is. And it's actually true what Mel said, that like a lot of trans people don't feel comfortable in either bathroom. I think we've all been there, especially like early transition, where you're just like, I don't think I can go into either of these without commotion. But yeah, I'm down for the third space. I mean, ideally, if I went to the bathroom at all, and I think most people would agree, it would just be a single room and no one else there.
Yeah.
That would be ideal.
Who the hell actually wants to go into a public bathroom?
Yeah, exactly.
Like with other people. Like, yeah, I much prefer having the entire bathroom to myself. I think everyone does.
Yeah, and that's my other concern. How this could backfire on me is that we get a single sex space set up, or a single person space set up, and then no one will use the regular bathrooms. But then maybe long term, everyone will decide, no, this is the way forward. Everyone wants just...
No, I think there's a lot of people that'll still like use the regular bathroom, but honestly, ironically, I think more people would probably use it that are afraid of trans women. They'll probably use a single space, and most trans women who like pass reasonably will just be like, it doesn't matter because I know that nothing's going to happen here.
Mel, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, I would like to say that, Penny, I think that your comment is incredibly unhelpful. And then I think that a lot of feminists, and I'm not going to speak for all feminists, but I think that a lot of feminists would totally have trans women's backs when it comes to campaigning to get that third space. Because I think that a lot of us, and I'm not going to say all of us because I've actually been lectured about this before, don't speak for all women, but I think a lot of us were behind trans women and trans men when, all of this was first kind of like, this discourse was becoming a thing.
Yeah.
I think that most of us would be like we would be behind you 100% when it comes to let's get third spaces so that everyone has their privacy, so everyone feels safe. And I think that a lot of us, like for me personally, the bathroom thing, it's just like, that's not really like what I'm really concerned about. I'm more concerned about places like prisons and shelters and things like that, where people are very, very vulnerable. I'm not really all that concerned with people peeing. But I do think that just for the safety and the privacy of everyone, I think a third space option at least would be really preferable to what we have now. And actually where I live in Washington, most places do have that. They have men's, women's, and then they have gender neutral, you know, like single stall private bathrooms, which I think
that's an American thing.
But I think it's a phenomenal option because I know a lot of trans people, like I said, who are not comfortable in either bathroom, and they just feel like they have a lot more privacy there and they're just a lot more comfortable. So I think that option is a really good, and it's such a small thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're creating some giant bathroom in a tiny, because I know that in England, obviously the buildings are smaller and they're older and things are different. My husband's actually English. And so he's told me about how much more complicated it would be to put third spaces in places in England. But I think that what happens when it comes to the trans community and the gender critical community is that we're actually alienating people who would be allies, because I think that feminists would have loved to, you know, help the trans community fight to get those things, to get those private safe spaces. It's just that we were never included in the conversation. And it was just kind of like, this is just how it is. And then things like Karen White happened by putting, you know, a male person who was a predator in a prison for women, and that's not okay. Those are the things that I'm really concerned about.
Sorry for interrupting you, but this is just the thing, because this starts. The reason I know that it's the other spaces that are much more important, where women can't escape from, like shelters and prisons. They're the like biggest important spaces where we need to address this issue with like a shed load of hard lines, really, because there's no way. There's no other way of looking at it. But the reason we're in this situation is because of the bathroom situation. Because we just want to pee, and now we're in your sports, and now we're in your prisons, and now we're in your shelters. And so for me, that's kind of like it's become so symbolic. Do you know what I mean?
So how would you police it? I mean, I can understand how you would police. That's the problem. Like you can easily police trans women having access to women's shelters, women's prisons, sports. Like those are ones where there can be some sort of realistic leeway. But with bathrooms, that's the one where, like, for example, if we're going to talk about this, you know, the rumoured, because I personally don't think it's ever going to happen, with the Conservatives looking at bringing in like a bathroom law into the UK. I mean, that's something which I find completely illiberal. It removes the choice of venue to be able to decide who can go in there or not. How are you going to police that? What is it going to look like? Do you have to, centres going to have to build an additional third space to cater for trans people? And if so, how much is that going to cost? There's a lot of questions in there to deal with. Whereas sports and prisons, there is a much more simple answer.
Yeah.
So you see what I mean?
I see what you mean. You can't, because I've faced this question many times. You can't police it. I don't think people should police it. I think it's a matter of cultural thing. It's much like self-ID. It has been scrapped by all legal parties, but self-ID still exists as a cultural thing. People identify as a woman on a Friday and start using women's spaces the same day. Self-ID exists as a cultural thing. So what I think trans people should do is start saying, it's not really right for us to be here. We've heard what women are saying about this, and we're like, no, we need to start doing something else.
Just to kind of pick up on something which you just said there, I'll let somebody else talk in a minute, because it's something which I noticed that when you're saying like women are saying this, do you acknowledge that is mostly the gender critical, the radical feminist side, and that isn't necessarily all women?
No, I acknowledge that, because even 50, because I did a poll recently asking like, where do you draw the line and who has access to female space? I think my options were something like, anyone who says they're a woman, I think that got about 15%. Full-on transsexuals, they've done every step they can take. That got 29%, and 49% was women only. So even among my following, which everyone must think is the most radical following and that I'm only catering to one side, even 49% of my following, less than 50% thought it should be women only. But I think it should be women only. So that's my own personal view on top of what my following thinks, which are probably less transphobic than me.
But again, just to clarify though, a lot of your following is going to be of the gender critical I mindset. So you are going to get a bit of a biased.
Yeah, but I was surprised that it was less than 50 would draw the line at sex.
So Leon, so Mel, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I do have something to say, because I know that Leon was saying something earlier about how women don't experience transphobia and all of these things, and how, you know, trans women are much more likely to
experience transphobia.
Well, right now in the comments, and actually for the last 2 or 3 days, people have been accusing me of being a trans person, and I have experienced a lot of this, because right now in the comments they're talking about how I'm a man and I should not be talking about these things, because I do support trans people. I do support trans women. I don't think that people should be shitty to other people because of how they identify. I think that's absolutely abhorrent and unacceptable. I do think that having a gripe about, you know, not being included in conversations about our spaces that's valid. I am gender critical 100%, but I don't think that this behavior is okay. And I do think that I've experienced and I've seen a lot more transphobia than I thought existed in the gender critical space within the last week or two. And I'm not going to, I think that it's important to call that out and say that it does exist, and it needs to stop. It's not okay.
Yeah. I mean, the screenshot which I have up right now is someone basically accusing you of being AGP when you are actually a woman.
And actually in the comments of this live stream as well.
And it has been there has been a bit of an edgelord takeover in the comments.
And I am 100% a biological woman, and it's just absolutely abhorrent. I don't know why this is happening. I think it's because I support trans women, and I don't hate trans women, and I think that it's ridiculous. So I think it should be called out. It's not okay.
So
someone just said in the comments, dude looks like a lady. Whenever I'm at work, I seem to go to the water cooler the moment they put that song on the radio, and it's the most annoying, frustrating thing. And I kind of just have to catwalk to it.
Insulting people's looks is so counterproductive. It does nothing. It does not move the conversation along. It doesn't progress us in any way. It's unhelpful.
Right. So I'm going to move on to doing the super chats in, because quite a lot of them have come in. Leon, do you have any last comments on the bathrooms before we move on?
No, I'm pro separate space if they're practical.
Okay, so there's quite a lot of super chats have come in, so I'm going to try and go over as many of them as I can. So Danny Nowicki with the €10. If gender was really a social construct, I should have to go well with my masculine socialization, and I haven't go for transition, right? Or ain't so.
What?
So I think what they're saying is, if gender was really a social construct, she would have to stay being masculine.
Sure.
Why not? Social constructs change and are fluid. I don't really understand why that's a thing.
Mr. Whippy with the Mr. Whippy 101 with the €2. You need to debate Jesse Lee Peterson. I would probably do that. I wouldn't mind having more discussions with bigger name YouTubers. I am Pandisis with the $5. Leon, not to be disrespectful, but you have tunnel vision. Yes, trans experience discrimination. However, women are historically treated as less than.
Right, and trans people are not?
Okay. Michael Joseph Costa with the $10. NYC Club. NB male with a beard, suit tie, 6 feet tall, 100% male, used women's bathroom the whole night. He said, I don't care what people think of me. And he felt more feminine that day. Insane. Peak non-binary moment. Yeah. It's one of the really frustrating things when it comes to, like when Fionne mentioned earlier, if you're going to have a gender neutral bathroom, it is always the women's every single time. And whenever that happens, you always get like NBs who look like guys who basically are biological males, but they're feeling a little bit feminine. They're feeling a little bit feminine, so they're not men. They're not actually men. And so they can just go in there and use it. So like that kind of story just does not surprise me. Sugar Waters with the $5. I think there is a difference between empathizing and visibility. Many trans people see women, but don't empathize with our experience biologically. What do you guys think of that?
I think that's fair. I think that once you start passing, stop calling me a dude. Okay. Like, I think that once you start passing to a certain extent, I think that you're probably experiencing a lot of the same things, like misogyny. I think that, like, I cannot imagine that Blair White lives her life without misogyny. I imagine that she goes out into the world and people objectify her and think she is a woman. And I do think that that's true. But I think that for the majority of people, it's harder to empathize with women and what they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm never going to know what a period feels like, for example.
Thank God.
Yeah, so, you know, it's going to be very hard to kind of empathize with that kind of... I'm using that as an example of something where, as far as the social side goes, then yes, I could absolutely relate to a lot of it.
Consider yourself lucky, because it's fucking horrendous.
Oh, God, I don't... Yeah. I'm not Jessica Yaniv.
It's about I'm like dying. Like the last week or so, my husband's been like, "You are insufferable." Because I'm just like, "Oh my God, my boobs hurt." It's horrible. So you don't want that part.
My Felicita with the 20 DKK. Where are the trans men in all this? Well, I can see that Mars is in the chat. And there's probably a few other trans guys watching us. This is just a whamming stream. This was a whamming stream. So, you know, respecting his masculine identity by not inviting any trans guys. Besides, I had a trans guy on the Seal of Approval last night. So you know, they still get their representation on my channel.
Yes, we can never invite enough people. You can never tag enough people into a conversation.
Not intersectional enough.
I know, it is.
Kat Richardson with the $5. Why do trans women always dismiss the experiences of women, but their personal experiences are fact? Leon is being so rude, dismissive, and disrespectful.
Okay, that's your experience.
You know what? I don't feel disrespected. So I think that we're all emotive because it's personal to all of us. And I think that we all have different experiences. And I feel like I've probably been just as emotive as Leon has because we all have different experiences and we're all coming from it from different angles. And it's personal to all of us. So
yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, this is a very emotionally charged debate. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
So don't whilst people might get very emotive about it, don't excuse that for like hate or disrespect. And that goes for everyone.
I don't feel disrespected at all. I think that she's been pretty fair and kind. So,
yeah. Rose English with the $1.99. Stay away from ladies lose.
I'm trying. I keep failing. I'm sorry.
But,
sure.
You know, Yaniv.
The validation. I can't.
No. You know, I don't know. Mr. Whippy 101. Mr. Whippy 101 with a €2. Soygon, it depends on the child of a card. Oh, God, none of you guys are going to get that. Maybe it's best if I don't go into that one. Mars with the $10. Activism, I'd have to throw my beliefs out. With the TRAs, they deny biology amongst other issues. With the GC trans side, you're asking that I deny the facts that I'm a trans man and own being a woman.
Hated. I don't deny that.
Well, I can kind of see where Mars is coming from, because a lot of the times they're very dismissive of your experience, that perhaps your experience is not entirely based on your sex, in which they'll kind of say like, oh, well, there's no way you could ever experience anything like misogyny, when clearly that's a social issue. So if you're socially perceived as a woman, that might be a thing. Just like perhaps if you are a woman and you look maybe very manly, you could experience transphobia if people think you used to be a man or something.
I think this ties in a little bit to what Mel's dealing with a bit in this chat.
Exactly.
I've seen Mars kind of being just like slurred as a man who wouldn't understand any of the situation. And I personally messaged Mars to say, oh God, I thought that was ridiculous. So I hope Mars knows that.
Mars is a cool guy.
Yeah, Mars is smart. So
he's a good friend.
but I appreciate Mars's activism. I do think Rose. I do think Leon. I keep trying to call you Lion. Are you a Leo? Lion, are you a Leo?
I am an Aries.
You're an Aries. Oh God, right. This is probably
the intensity.
You're an Aries. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a very woman thing to say.
I'm a Leo.
Are you a Leo?
I am a Leo. I'll be 31 on August 15th.
God damn.
Oh, my dad's Leo.
So you'd have been in the same year as me in school, at least in the UK.
Yeah, I think we're about almost the same age.
Yeah, I'm like probably just around 6 months older. I am the grandma of the stream. I keep on being reminded. I don't like it.
I probably look like the grandma of the stream. I would, if I could, I'll try to be brief, but I would like to add something to this. I really wish that we could just exterminate activism altogether and maybe just have conversations instead, because I think that this is all very counterproductive, and I think that we're probably a lot more alike than we would like to think.
Yeah.
And I think that both sides are very dismissive of each other's experiences. I know Mars personally. He's probably one of my closest friends. And I do think that people are quick to use him and say, oh, because, you're a trans man, but you also have these experiences and stuff. But also, I think that, when you talk about how, where would you put a trans man in prison? They're very quick to dismiss that as well. So I think we need to start just talking and stop attacking, and the activism on both sides, I would love to just see it go away and just start having conversations and respecting each other. And that would be that would make me very happy, because that's what I would like to see.
That's what I want to see more of as well. That's what I always try and do with this channel, is to kind of have more of a conversation rather than just kind of screeching and yelling, which is what generally activism has become.
Yeah, and I'm very anti-activism, especially extreme activism. I would love conversations and understanding.
There's a few more super chats to read out. John Dirk, the £2. What do you do with your knob after you chop it off? Well, you don't chop it off.
Why do you make comments like that? See, this is the thing I'm pissed off about. As a gender critical person, stop it. Just fucking stop. You make us look like assholes. Go away, back into your fucking little hole where you're so miserable and so shitty and you hate everyone. Just stop talking for us because you make us look horrible. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Born to Beriled with the £2. Thank you for that. There's no message attached. Danny Miller with the £12. How gorgeous is Fionne?
Gorgeous.
That's my boyfriend, as if he paid £12.
Oh, is it? Oh. See, where's my boyfriend? Where's my boyfriend? Like he keeps on telling me that he's going to send in super chats. He doesn't.
Oh my God.
Stephen, if you're watching this.
I like the positivity a lot more. That's negative.
Oh. Mitch with the £2. All FTMs are whamming. If it breathes, it's a man. All right, Mitch.
Yeah, same.
Mitch is a friend of mine. I think he's just shit posting. The real Bamboonga with the $5. Is it just me, or is it odd to fight so hard over a place to take a dump? Just take a dump, and if you took a dump, put it back when you're finished.
Back where?
The toilet.
But that's not where it came from.
Ugh.
Why are people like that?
Right. Okay. So,
Is Fionne having her mojitos?
oh yeah, because you've been having some like really cool looking cocktails for a while. I've actually been because I was going to get a bottle of wine, but I'm just having I'm having vodka, which Scrump brought over to mine like
Jesus.
almost a year ago.
But I'm just having vodka. Preach.
That is such a move. I love it.
It's vanilla. It's vanilla vodka.
Oh my god!
It's actually really nice. It's absolute.
How much have you drunk this stream now?
Ume.
Yeah.
Oh, the real.
I've actually drank quite a. Holy shit! I've drank quite a bit.
That's how it starts.
Bloody hell! Okay, I've drank way more than I expected. Wow.
Lovely.
One more super chat's come through. The real Bamboonga with $5. Mel, calm. They're trolling you. Don't let them take away your smile. It's not a fair trade. And can I get one more? Dem sweet, sweet pronouns. Dem sweet, sweet pronouns. So we've been streaming now for over 2 hours. So I think this might be a good time to draw things to a close. So does anyone have anything else that they would like to add before we end?
Yes,
like an ending statement?
Yeah, I have something to add. So I definitely appreciate that we have these conversations to begin with because they're very vital, I would say. And I do think that there just needs to be like more policing on both sides, like policing like what people can like claim a trans identity in a practical sense and like things of that nature. But I think a part of the debate that is still to be had that I think might be a little bit more in depth and spicy is the fact that gender critical theory ultimately rests upon feminist theory. And I think we haven't gone into that yet because we've kind of just gone off the assumption of like gender critical theory a little bit when the experiences of men, I don't think can be like quantified that easily.
So, Mel, do you have a final statement?
I do. I would love to touch on that, but I'm not going to because I don't have time. But I would love to say that I saw this conversation taking place a couple weeks ago when Fionne and Lyon were first arguing, and I would encourage people to somehow get together and talk face to face because I feel like it's too easy to dehumanize each other on the internet, on Twitter, and make threats because you feel like it's you don't know the person. It's just so dehumanizing on Twitter. So I would encourage people to have a face-to-face conversation, FaceTime, do a live stream, do something, talk to each other so that you can actually see the emotion on each other's faces and understand each other because you are all human and you probably are actually a lot more similar than you think that you are. And that would be my final statement to everyone. I think that that's much more productive to be kind and respect each other and just talk to each other face to face.
Fionne, before I go on to like your final statement, just saw this in the chat. I do loads of streams. I do a stream every week with Scrump called Seal of Approval. It's on every Wednesday. We just kind of talking about general current events. Like we often have like guests like Count Dankula, Blair White, Omegon was on last night. So yeah, check that out. Anyway, Fionne, what are your final thoughts?
Sure. Sorry, Mel, I'm going to have to kind of counter you. But I'm particularly talking about women in the UK. Is don't be kinder. You've tried to be kind. You've tried to have a discussion, and we're met with a situation of no debate. You're just gaslit beyond proportion right now. You keep talking, keep standing up for each other. Don't let other people silence you, and keep defending your sisters, and leave the rest to us. us trans people will figure the rest out.
Okay, so with that, I know that Leon probably wants to say something to it, but
No, I'll leave it for
can't.
another time.
No,
Okay.
we're calling it a night. So before we end it, generally, does anyone here have like a YouTube channel or anything which they want to share?
I have one, but I have it on private right now because I was getting a lot of abuse and threats and stuff like that in the last couple of days because of a comment I left on Stephen King's trans and their women statement. So I'm just gonna not do that for right now.
One last super chat's come through from Anonymouses. Can anyone agree that the silencing of philosophical, biological, or legal debate leads to silencing of those outside of the in-group think? Well, yeah, it blatantly does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So with that, I want to thank Fionne, Lyon, and Mel for agreeing to come on. I actually think that this has been a really, really fascinating stream. Like, you know, I think it's been quite a healthy conversation. I know it got a bit heated at times, but I think that
it could have been worse. Trust me.
It could have potentially, but I think that things like this are needed more. Like actual kind of proper sit down discussions and people talking through it. So maybe I might do more of these and get in more people from like the trans side and the gender critical side and actually kind of have more of these discussions. So if this is the kind of thing that you would like to see, please let me know. So I know that people will be interested in more video, like kind of streams with non-binary people as well to get a little bit of an understanding there. So that's something which I might be working on. And of course, the seal of approval every Wednesday. And to let everyone know as well, my new upload day on YouTube is a Monday. At the moment, because I've changed the day, YouTube's killing me with the algorithm. So if you can click the notification button, I would really, really appreciate it because I don't think people are seeing my videos right now. Anyway, thank you, Lyon, Fionne, and Mel, for taking time out of your evenings to come on.
Like winking and nod. Fionne, Lyon.
By the way, thanks for being here. By the way, Fionne, thanks for being here and presenting the thing.
What's that?
I had a good time. I thought that this was an actual productive and healthy conversation, one that I would like to see a lot more people doing in the future.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well,
thank you so much for having us.
What's that?
Thank you so much for having us.
No problem. We'll probably do something like this again real soon. British Night of the £2. Great stream. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Also, British Night, let me know the next Wednesday you're free. Send me a DM before I forget. Anyway, thanks everyone for coming on. And there's the seal waving goodbye to everyone. And thank you everyone. And I'll see you all next time.
Have a nice night, guys.
Bye.